QDQ, Christian.
Thanks. Welcome to our workshop, the Creative Strings Workshop in Toronto with Victoria Ye, who helped co-host this and put this together with me. And she's a wonderful violinist and a dear friend of mine for many years. And of course, she's a Renaissance woman. And we've got a bunch of people here. We're live near downtown Toronto, as far as I can tell, with a bunch of students that have come to have this 2-day workshop with us. And they are bowed string players, violin, cello, viola, and they're interested in breaking beyond whatever maybe limitations of classical music training.
Right.
And so that's kind of what we're focused on, is talking about, how can you expand upon your training? So in our case as musicians, we're talking a lot about how can you be more creatively expressed, because as classical musicians, you don't necessarily you're not taught to improvise a lot.
Okay.
And also, like singers, for example, oftentimes they're taught to interpret and to execute, right? But they're not taught how to construct the music. And so this is a place of a lot of resistance for musicians, whether they're classically trained instrumentalists or perhaps for many singers as well.
Yeah. There's a need to feel like to get it perfect, to get it right, to not draw outside the line, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, and that's what the training, really, that's what the training is designed, is, how can you sing in tune? How can you sing with a bigger sound? How can you have better breath control, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other things of musicianship that are just remain as mysteries for most singers, unless they learn the piano and learn functional musicianship. So for me, a big part of my mission is connected to, changing this culture, the way that, why shouldn't a singer learn to be a composer as well and learn all the skills that piano players in a jazz band learn? But that's what we're doing here. Sorry, that was a very long-winded
no, you know what? I love
stealing
it.
the introduction.
Having been able to come early this morning was really fascinating, in watching everybody take risks and learn how in those risks, that's where the growth is. That was really like my favorite part of the morning. So I think we're on the same page there pretty much. Yeah. So where did you first come? How did you come to violin? Like, how was that?
My parents started me when I was 5. I don't remember. They just said, you're doing violin. That was it. I think most classical violin players, they start, between the age of 3 and 6, and their parents tell them they're doing it. As far as I know, there is a misconception out there that, that if you, this is for parents mostly. I think some parents are kind of misinformed, and they expect that their child is going to tell them that they want to play this instrument, or that they're going to demonstrate some proclivity towards doing it.
Yeah.
And I think it's too bad that that's the misperception, because I believe that basically if you have a kid and you want them to do music, you need to start them young, and it doesn't matter whether they cry and scream about it. It's like they have to brush their teeth, they have to practice the violin. That's how it is.
Right. Did you love it when you started? In saying that, was that true for you? Like, were you kicking and screaming at the beginning? Do you remember?
I mean, every kid kicks and screams about practicing, and you just need to learn to do it. And it's the same thing now with my son, who's 9, and with my oldest child, who's 21. They didn't always want to practice, but that's part of what you teach kids is discipline and that delayed gratification. So I know that there were a lot of times that I didn't want to practice, but I know there were other signs that my parents could see that demonstrated that I did love it.
Yeah. I think I read somewhere your parents kind of put you in a certain method of training.
The Suzuki method is very popular for classical violin players and other instrumentalists, and there's a lot of great things about the method. I highly recommend it, mainly because it's just it's a great community of devoted teachers, and there's a lot of great ideas in the pedagogy that are child-centric, and also based around this triangle between a teacher, a parent, and a child. And so this idea of everybody supporting the child and becoming a better person.
Right. At what point did you know you were going to take it seriously?
So probably when I was like 14 or 15, I went to summer camp, a place called Chautauqua. Chautauqua, which isn't too far from here, Chautauqua, New York. And I think I was maybe 14, and just everybody there they were just really serious. And so my peers, they kind of inspired me.
Was there a certain song you became obsessed with?
Well, during that particular summer,
as a singer, like that for me is like something that happened.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually, during that summer, I mean, there's been a lot of songs I've been obsessed with over my life, but I remember that summer, Symphony Espagnole, which is a concerto by Lalo.
Okay.
Edward Lalo. I kind of fell in love with that piece, and some of the other romantic classical violin repertoire I really kind of fell in love with at the age of 14, which is a romantic time, as you might imagine.
Yeah. Now, moving forward into your teens, in watching some other interviews, and obviously listening to and knowing a little bit about your history, your story is fascinating to me, actually, and quite inspiring to me personally.
Well, yeah, I would say that during probably during my middle school years and high school years, it was like a turbulent time as an adolescent where I was either tuning out or acting out in a variety of ways.
Okay.
Acting out destructively towards others, and also acting destructively towards myself.
Right.
And I think that, and that ultimately led to, me getting convicted on a drug charge and going to prison when I was 20 until I was 24. And I think that there were just issues that I had, as a young person, and that was how I dealt with those issues that I had, the fears, the anger, the grievances, whether imagined or real. The way that I dealt with those things was by acting out or tuning out.
Right.
Acting out could be, various things that you could do to act out. And tuning out, I think, probably for me, was like smoking weed or drinking or smoking cigarettes. Those are a way to sort of numb myself. So,
was music your outlet?
I think music was a really important outlet during that time that kept me from going farther out on the ledge than I already was, and music ultimately helped me get through that prison term, and ultimately has been one of the things that has helped me to continue to survive and try to recover or get better as a person even today. I mean, I still think we're always working through issues, whether it's trauma or fears or something that happened to us, and I probably couldn't articulate every single thing about that, but I know that that's what actually interests me the most now is just the general process of how can I get to be a better person. And so even now when I do these music workshops, or whether I'm doing business coaching, consulting, or all the different things, whether I'm performing, whether I'm teaching, I'm really trying to think how does this connect to ultimately me being better, whether I'm being a better teacher, being a better parent, and how can I really pass on these things to the people that I'm coaching? Because often people come to me, they want to become a better musician, but that's not actually the thing that they need.
Is the piece that's missing.
Yeah, or they think they need a piece of information about how to make more money, or a piece of information about how to play the violin better.
Yeah.
But the piece of information they might think that they need isn't the first thing that they need. Let's say that way. I think the first thing is probably you need to have a clear vision of who you want to be and why that's important to you, what you want your life to look like. After that vision, you need to have some goals, and not too many, that really align with that
can
vision.
you speak to that? First of all, thank you for sharing that, because mental health is something that is very important to me personally, but also I think in the artist community is something that really doesn't get talked about enough. And I think bringing that open into the conversation, into the world, is super, super important. So thank you for sharing that. But going back to goals and vision, you were talking about whittling it down, because you offer so much as a business person, as a teacher, as an educator, as someone who plays around the world. How do you, when you first start out, kind of whittle it down? What exactly is your vision? How did you specifically kind of figure that out for yourself?
Yeah, good question. I think it's if you want to develop a vision, I think it's important to kind of brainstorm about it, and I think you should think about two components of your vision. And people, a lot of the people I talk to, when they start talking about their vision, it's all altruism, And I sort of feel like sometimes that's bullshitty, whether or not people intend it that way. That was my first curse word of the weekend, by the way.
Yeah.
Sorry if I offended anybody. But like I think for me, I think it's important to acknowledge for all of us that like part of what we want out of life involves receiving something, and part of it is connected to contributing. So I think if we just try to be like, it's all about contribution, it's all about making an impact on everybody, we hear a lot about that. I think it is important to connect whatever the impact that you want to make and the contribution, but I think it's also important to acknowledge what you want to receive. So like if I play the violin, like do I want to touch people through that, and make a difference for them? Of course I do. But do I want to get something from it? Yes, I do. I want to get attention from it. I want to feel, powerful from that. I want to feel freedom, and I want to feel a catharsis.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that your vision is honest and connects these two components of what you're receiving and what you're giving. And I think that also if you're coming up with a vision, I think it's important to get feedback, to have a source of feedback that can echo back to you what you're saying and help you work through that process until you really articulate what really feels true.
Yeah. Do you, in terms of, you were mentioning people being altruistic about their, like, I just want to give, I just want to play. What do you think that's about, specifically for a lot of artists? The inability to monetize. Let's just call it what it is.
Oh.
Like to, you know what I mean? That like contribution factor, but forgetting that there's value in what they do.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's interesting because I heard two separate questions there. I'm not sure if you meant it that way, but what I heard at first is like a lot of people just talk about how they're just motivated by wanting to give, and sometimes I don't think they really feel that way, but they feel like that's
okay. That's the right thing to say.
That's the right thing to say to make them look better. I think we're afraid to be honest sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
I think the other part of the question, or the other question, which is why do people have a hard time being a stand for their value, or for asking for what they're worth, or why are people always giving away their time, giving away their energy when they really can't afford to do that?
Right.
Maybe there's something in your life is suffering because you're giving away your time for free to this project, your health, your grandkids, like something, part of that is we're just not in alignment. We all suffer from being exposed to so many mutually exclusive value statements every single day. You need to be with your family, you need to make lots of money. Well, are those things at odds? And are they at odds? And you need to practice your viola for 3 hours a day. You're like, wait a second, that doesn't add up. We're gonna have to pick from these. We become a little bit schizophrenic, because we get a value statement. Live your life out of love. And it's like, well, that sounds great. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Well, it's true, but then we have to reconcile it with all these other competing value statements, like make a lot of money and then you can make a bigger difference. So you have to reconcile those things. So a lot of times we're just schizophrenic. So we're not aligned, we're not consistent, because we're just pulled in so many different directions from these mutually exclusive values that we're trying to follow, that we're bombarded by.
Right.
And again, that goes back to, do you have a clear vision, and do you have like maybe 3 things that you're working towards that are goals that are alignment with that, and can you say no to everything else? And do you have that discipline?
Yeah. That brings up, when you're at a certain level and you're progressing in your career as an artist, when did you first start knowing what to say no to? When certain things can pay the bills but aren't necessarily in alignment with your vision, what can you tell people who have trouble saying no to things and no to gigs?
Well, think about, when you don't say no to somebody, or you have a hard time saying no, just think about who you're ripping off. Like if somebody like Victoria asked me about, hey, maybe we'll do this gig on this coming week or whatever, and I was like, well, of course, I want to hang out with Victoria. Victoria's like my dear friend, and I don't see her that much, and and then and then I went to my agent and I said, like, well, let's do this thing, I just want to do it because it's my friend, and we didn't even know how much, if the gig was going to happen or what the money was going to be or whatever, but I said to my agent, like, we should just do it for X, and my agent said, no, you can't do that. You can't keep the lights on if you give everybody discounts. If you give everybody a friends deal. But it's not just about keeping the lights on. It's about like, okay, so if I were to take an extra day, that's ripping my wife off. It's ripping my son off of my time.
Yeah.
And like I haven't been to gone enough. So I think we just have to be intellectually honest about what's important to us and what are we committed to.
Yeah.
And we don't get to give things away because that's just you're taking something from somebody else.
Right, but I think so many artists struggle with that. You were talking about value systems, mindset, vision. Is there anything that you do on a daily basis that keeps yourself in a positive, grounded mindset?
Listen to my brother Lewis House's School of Greatness podcast as often as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of those things like gratitude and I think is really important. And also, I've been doing the reframing exercise, which is like just noticing that all the times that I get frustrated every day with myself or with the outside circumstance, is trying to get into a practice of disrupting myself as soon as that happens. So I get frustrated about something that's a failure or a disappointment, and then I just stop myself and I just instantly try to reframe it and say like, what, I need to see the positive in this because I can choose to just be really pissed off or really like dark about this thing that's happening, whether it's somebody else's fault or whether it's my fault, or I can just be like, okay, yeah, I know that I'm going to have failures every day. I know that I'm going to have disappointments every day, and I need to be committed to reframing it and saying like, this is a positive. There's a positive in this. I get to learn something from this. For example, this workshop in Toronto this weekend, I had a bigger goal for how many people I wanted to come. They didn't come. I could be dark about that. I could feel like, pissed off that like, why are Canadians, this way, or why did they,
totally. Create your story
I could be like, oh, I'm such a loser because I didn't do a better job of getting people out of this thing. Like either way, but both of those are just really negative,
Right.
And so the same thing for Andrew, who's maybe beating himself about because he didn't practice the viola for 3 hours a day. It's like, no, what can you learn from it? Like, it could be one of two things, and we talked about it in the car. It was like, maybe you don't need to practice the viola for 3 hours a day, and so that's what you get to learn from this. Or maybe you get to learn something about your own keeping promises to yourself, and but either way, there's an opportunity not to beat yourself up, not to blame other things about it, but just to try to take something really positive from it, which I think hopefully it is going to be for Andrew. And that's the funny thing about it is that like for every person that's participating in this workshop, I feel like these are the conversations that are going to be the meaningful ones for them. So for example, Lucy asked me today, she was like, I want to do classical improvisation and I want to do projects where, because she's also a scientist and getting her PhD in math, but she plays the violin and she has a child and like she's like super Renaissance woman. And so her questions are like, how can I put together an ensemble that's involving classical improvisation? And how can I do more improvisation over math and over science problems and relative physics? I don't know what she was asking, but what it ended up becoming a question about was actually, and she didn't expect this because the answer she thought she wanted was like, teach me how to navigate harmony, teach me how to play, over a classical improvisation. But what it ended up becoming was, how are you going to put together a trio of other musicians? Is that going to be a partnership, or are you going to be totally in charge of it? And as soon as we started talking about it a little more, she realized that she's going to need to be the one that is in charge of it.
Right.
And that's actually a more scary situation. It's like for Lucy to take her career forward as a musician, she's actually going to have to give a lot more thought to the business side than the nuts and bolts of, playing Prokofiev harmony. Right? Does that resonate for you or not, Lucy? Do you think that's true? Yeah.
It's interesting, way that you before, and then you consider and think about more.
Yeah, and it's like Lucy came to this workshop thinking that she was going to learn some like secret trick about how to understand harmony.
Yes.
Right, or like how to improvise, but I think one of the things that's going to help her the most when she leaves, and I could be wrong, we haven't had a ton of time to talk, is going to be her getting this total vision and goals for her life. It's going to be those questions, like how is she going to balance the priority about wanting to be a mom, wanting to do math, wanting to do music, wanting to have a family, and wanting to make money. If all those things can really come together, then these lower level things like how to play to improvise over Prokofiev will find where they need to fall in. Because otherwise, people come to a workshop and they just want to learn everything, but they don't need everything. So they end up spending so much energy and so much time on things that they just don't need.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's for me. What is one skill you continue to hone personally? Either as a musician and, well, let's do both, as a musician and a human being.
Well, as a musician, there's just so many skills. And so what I'll do is I'll pick a focal point. Because as classically trained musicians, we all had teachers, and our teachers just told us what to do. And so classical musicians, just like voice, singers or actors, they work on diction, so they have their exercise that they work on diction. I would submit, humbly, that after a while that just becomes a waste of time and energy. Like anybody can go and they can do their like, and they can do that for 15 minutes and don't actually think about it. And they put a lot of energy into it just to get their chops to where they needed to be that day or do the thong was thipping through the valves of the, or whatever. But like, are you really growing as an actor? Like in those 15 minutes, are you really actually progressing as a singer? Like you're just getting yourself back to like zero every day, So I get into trouble with a lot of people about this because it's like, with those 15 minutes, you could be working on intonation, you could be working on your voice, but you could also be doing something at the same time. If you had a more constructive way to use that time. So we just don't practice constructively. But so you want to focus on a skill, and whatever that skill is, you want to say, I want to get better at this skill. And you don't want to have 20 skills. You want to have like one. So right now, skills that I'm focused on, I want to get deeper into the diminished scale.
Okay.
I'd like to be more clear on the diminished scale. So that might be one skill that I want to work on, like how to navigate the diminished scale and how to feel more comfortable applying the diminished scale over certain sets of chord changes. Let's say that. Okay.
As a human being.
As a human being, yeah. I'm not sure that I can articulate the answer to the question, but I know that I want to get better at developing the habit of forgiving myself on a daily level, like because I think that if I'm not forgiving myself, then a lot of times I'm coming from a place of defensiveness. I'm coming from a place of posturing. So I'm trying to become more and more authentic, and less coming from a place of feeling pressured. To impress people or to please people or to whatever, redeem myself.
Yeah. And then also, like for me personally, like I do that a little bit too, where, and might just be a me thing, not you, but after something happens is to instead of being like, that's okay, you get to try again, you get to wake up tomorrow, like that self-berating, like I should have nailed that, or I should have,
Right.
And I think that also comes from years from being younger, of trying to perfect, like my art as well, like trying to, and it goes along with, that's why I was laughing so hard when you're talking about the la 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 la, like all that sort of stuff, because at a certain point, that was great when you were novice, and it's not that warm-ups don't have their place, but when you become obsessive about that stuff, you're not actually growing as an artist.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I really appreciate that. Now, when you first started out, so let's say you're a new musician, doesn't matter what age, or a new artist, and you're trying to make a go of it. I know you really hit the pavement, right? When you got out of prison, you really, you went for it.
Yeah.
So how did you create that much opportunity for yourself? Just let the listeners know, like, what you did to actually, get going.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I was in jail from age 20 to 24, and there was an indeterminate sentence, so I didn't know actually how long I was going to stay in jail.
Yeah.
And then when I got out, I was still on probation. So there's a sense of like, all this weight hanging on you and this kind of anxiety that comes from that a lot of times. But also, I think that I just felt like I had so much to prove, and I felt really ashamed, and that I burdened my family and like let people down, and I felt like I just didn't have time to waste. And so I just, luckily I was able to ask, or my dad and my mom both offered to help me. They were like, you can stay with us and whatever you want to do, we'll help you figure out how to do it. Because
Yeah.
I actually thought I was going to work construction when I got out of jail.
Okay.
I told them that, and they were like, well, don't you want to be a violinist? Like, it's cool if you don't. I was like, yeah, I do want to be a violinist, but I don't know how I'm going to do that. Like, how I was a very fine violinist, and, but I had no idea how I was going to make a career. And it's actually funny because the Columbus Symphony ended up offering me basically a full-time job like a month after I got out of prison, which is a really big deal. I mean, it's like the Columbus Symphony Orchestra. It's like it's like a tier 2, like professional symphony orchestra. Like
some stability
money.
with it, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like a good job. I mean, people, like most people can't get that job. And they basically offered it to me, a month out of getting out of jail. And of course I was great. But what I wanted to do was to become a quote unquote jazz violinist, which I didn't know really what the name.
Back in that, I feel like when you got out,
count them on one hand. Yeah,
there weren't many.
Yeah, there weren't many violinists that I was aware of that were making a career working for themselves as a performer, doing things outside of classical music.
Right.
And just a handful. And most of the ones that you would have thought of were like superstars, like Jean-Luc Ponty. So it's like, well, I want to be an actor, so that means I need to be Brad Pitt. Like if he was your example. I don't know if that's a good example for actors or not, but I don't know. But
it's the one everybody's familiar with.
Okay,
right?
yeah, sorry, yeah. But I had no idea how I was going to actually create a career as a jazz violinist. Luckily, my mom and dad were like, yeah, we'll help you figure it out. And so because my dad had been a life insurance salesman and my mom had helped him kind of run his office or build his business. And so between the two of them, they kind of were willing to give me the skills or teach me or help me. But the thing is, I was in such a low place, that it was like there was no, I was just willing to try anything.
Right.
And that was an advantage.
It was kind of like a nothing to lose attitude.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was like an advantage. I had nowhere to go but up. So that was an advantage for me. I think I see a lot with my clients, a lot of the people that I coach in their business, in their careers, or in their musical development, that people actually, they need more of that attitude. Because the way to grow any career or any business is to sell. Period, the end. And selling just means you need to offer your service to somebody who might want to.
What would you say to artists who think that sell is a bad 4-letter word?
I would say that's the only way you're going to get what you want. I mean, it's important. Yeah, I mean, if
or they're uncomfortable with it,
I mean, it goes back to your earlier question. Like, if you're not willing to offer your service, then who are you ripping off?
Yeah.
Like let's like role play here, like right, like so let's say Chelsea, you want to you're an artist, right, and you want to grow your career.
Yes.
And I happen to have a service that I think I can help you do that. Like I'm a business coach.
Yeah.
So I could say, well, Chelsea's my friend, so I don't want to offer Chelsea to pay me money to coach her, or I could be like, I really believe I can help Chelsea. Like, I really want to help Chelsea, so I'm going to pitch you, to pay me money to be your coach, Yeah. Now, if I don't offer that to you, who am I ripping off? I'm ripping you off.
Yeah.
Because, so a lot of times artists, without realizing it, they're devaluing themselves.
Right. And also, we were talking a little bit on the earlier on the break there. Also, if you're not offering, so, like, if you're offering the coaching and no one has any skin in the game, like,
right,
you know what I mean? Like,
if
for me personally, like if I invest in something, I'm taking it way more seriously. Right. I'm also lighting the fire under my own butt by paying. Yeah. So I feel like sometimes when we do things for, whether they're artist friends or just people, clients in general, and we're actually doing them a disservice because they're not actually, they don't have enough risk. Like, there has to be risk in order for you to push yourself, I feel.
Right.
And that's when results happen, is when you take the risk, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you have a client and that client, say you've given them a discount and then all of a sudden they're missing a meeting.
Right.
And they're not on time for their call.
Absolutely.
Or because they're not actually taking it seriously, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, even somebody here, and I don't even think that was his intention, but he was like, hey, I'm thinking about bringing people to your show this weekend. And, I wrote him back and I was like, I know that there are tickets that are available online and you can pay for them. And it was partly, and I happen to really like this person. I'm not even saying that he was asking for like a freebie.
Yeah.
But it was an exercise I had to do to resist, because if I give away tickets to my show, what does that say about the value of all the work that I've done?
Yeah.
To go and be ready to perform.
Yep.
And I've done that for too long.
Yep.
You know, and we were having a conversation with somebody else who was talking about other musicians who, you know, who work for two. This is a common thing.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a common thing for artists. Well, you know, it's all these hobbyists out here that are bringing the level down. They're willing to work for less, and so that's why I can't get a good gig. Mm-hmm. So I hear that a lot, and sometimes
I hear it a lot too. Yeah.
And my attitude about it is like, you know, you can't control what everybody else charges, but you can control what you charge. Mm-hmm. And you're 100% responsible for getting paid for what you do. Mm-hmm. You need to go and hustle and like find a way to make what you do valuable enough that people will pay you what you want to get paid.
Yeah.
And to message and get the message clear enough so that people want to pay that.
Right.
And in the meantime, if you're complaining about that somebody else is working for $50, then you're just getting in your own way.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Amen. Yeah. And part of it is because I suspect part of it is because you are, not you, but the general you, you are more comfortable bitching about
Right.
the thing you're not getting than going after the thing you want.
Right.
Right? Ultimately.
And I could be wrong. I mean, it might be a fact that like when people work for less, it brings down the overall rate. I mean, I'm not saying that's not true.
But I think that's a story too.
Right.
That we like to tell.
Yeah.
To keep ourselves stuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Instead, if you rise and we're like, and then people, if you lead by the example,
Right.
people are more apt to go, hey, look at that guy's doing it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And this is, probably for a lot of your listeners, whether they're actors, whether they're singers, or whether they're fiddle players or classical musicians,
Mm-hmm.
there is this very nebulous realm between the amateur / hobbyist and the professional.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
does it like completely for a living. And there's a lot of resistance for people that are in that nebulous area.
Yep.
You know, about what they call themselves, about, you know, the reasons that they claim that they are wherever they are in that territory.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and a lot of times people will say, well, I just need to get better at my art, and then I'm going to start making money. And that is a cop-out 95% of the time.
Right.
Like, you know, if you want to get better, and also I'm saying this from the vantage point of someone who has been, you know, described by many people as being great at what I do. I mean,
Yeah.
being one of the top jazz violinists in the world. So I just happen to have a unique vantage point on this, which is this, that nobody knows the difference. Nobody knows the difference between me, the so-called one of the best jazz violinists in the world, and most of the students in this room. Mm-hmm. You know, people do not know the difference, and people are not going to pay me based on my ability. People are going to pay me because I sold them.
Yeah. At some point, you have to give yourself the title, like give yourself, and like you're mirroring your own value of how you feel about yourself is going to reflect in how people see you.
Yeah, and also the value of your service is not always equivalent to how well you quote unquote do something. Like you play the most in tune, and you're the fastest playing violin player. Who cares? Like I show you somebody who you can sing circles around a person who's making 100 times more money than you. And so this is the thing we love to complain about, right? Like I don't know what's.
People become bitter and jaded.
I'm
like,
sure
I
there's
can
somebody.
do da-da-da.
I can sing better than Celine Dion. Why is she making $100 million?
Yeah.
You're missing the point.
Yeah.
She communicated the value of her message. She put it in front of people. She found a way to capture that value, and that's a big part of it. Mm-hmm. So everybody's all the day, I need to get, once I practice these things, no, shut up. I'll just stop you right there. No, you want to do something, start selling it. Mm-hmm. Well, you say this though, right? Don't wait to create.
Yeah.
Don't wait to sell.
I know you were saying that to me earlier. Don't wait to sell.
Sell it, then create it once they paid for it. My brother says it all the time.
I know, he does. I gotta take a page. I gotta take a page. What would you say to artists who are waiting for certain opportunities? They're like, I'm not ready for this opportunity. Like, do you know what I mean? They're waiting to be ready. What do you tell them?
I mean, I guess it feels similar to what I just said, which is like, you know, the best way to be ready for something is to do it. Mm-hmm. And so, again, people they think that they need to develop and practice so that they'll be ready for the gig, but the opposite is true. You need to go do the gig or get the gig And then you have a deadline, and then you have to practice and get the things ready just for that gig that you need. Very specific.
Right.
So it's like if someone hires Lucy and said, we want you to come improvise over this Prokofiev thing with a piano trio while someone does, abstract math on a chalkboard next May, there's a level of specificity that then tells Lucy what she needs to work on.
Right.
Without that specificity, she's like, I just need to get better. But she doesn't even know what the project is yet.
Right. So not be afraid of, or not be waiting for someone to give you the very specific thing that you need.
Yeah.
To just go out and see what happens and use your ability.
Yeah.
To trust yourself. So what I'm hearing you say is to trust yourself that you have the ability to learn, and when you need to, you will be able to put pedal to the metal and learn what you need to do in order to deliver, and not be waiting and not be constantly curating skills to be able to deliver everything on this earth, so that when you're asked, you're able to deliver. Because that's exhausting.
Within reason. I mean, because if someone said okay, Andrew, you need to play the such and such viola concerto with the Toronto Symphony next year. Then he needs to come to someone like me who knows, and be like, yo, am I going to be ready to do this if I give everything I have in a year? And I would probably say, I love you, but the answer I think is no. Because you just started playing the viola, 2 years ago. And and that's just an unreal, reasonable expectation.
Within reason, yeah.
Within reason, yeah. And it's not a knock on, Andrew's, he's a very capable, high-performing individual, but it's just not reasonable for people to, there are some things that are reasonable. So you want to have that feedback, but then you want to have some specificity and say, I'm working on this skill because I have this project in mind.
Last couple questions for you. As an educator, what direction would you like to see arts education going in terms of as we cultivate new artists as a society?
Well, specifically in the realm of what I do with classically trained musicians, I feel that the classical music education has that's where I come from, and those are the people that I feel like I can help.
Yep.
But I feel like it's kind of segregates itself, from other, and it kind of puts itself above other traditions without necessarily knowing that it's doing that. And so it's really contributing in a way to this the segregation that occurs in society and the marginalization that occurs in society. So what I mean is, if you talk to a serious conductor or someone at a serious conservatory about, fiddle music, which is music that comes from the participatory culture of Appalachia or Cape Breton or whatever, right?
Yeah.
They're going to definitely most of the time, those people will poo-poo it. They'll condescend. They'll even say something. And one of my mentors actually said this. He said, "Well, it's not the same as high art."
Right.
And the same thing if you say, "Well, what about jazz music, or what about R&B or pop music?" And they'll sort of kind of discount it in one way or another.
Turn their nose up at it a little bit.
Yeah, and it's but it's the institutions do this as well. On an institutional level. So to me, that's just really. It's a mirror for how we are, I don't know if the right word is nativist in society. It's a mirror of the types of discounting other people's experiences that are invisible to us. So as a man, seeing a woman's experience and discounting it because I don't understand it. For example, thinking that if a woman spends time in raising a child, that's not serious because I've never done it, and so I just assume, well, that's easy, and this is a historical thing that's still such a problem, but is improving in the world in some places, right?
Yeah.
The same thing with racism, the same thing with the way people marginalize people with around gender identity, sexual identity, or whatever, and so I feel like in the classical music world, that this is a mirror of this by saying this European art music is serious music, and sure, that other stuff's fun, but it's not really serious. It's like
You're not singing
Yeah,
opera. What are you
exactly.
singing? Like, you think you're singing, you're going to sing some Aretha Franklin or whatever, right?
So this, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, this is one aspect, though, that I really feel is important to me,
Yeah.
and that I want to change in education, the culture of education. Like, it should be like we study music,
Right.
and we appreciate all the skills and all the perspectives that we can get from these different subcultures and these different aspects of music.
Yeah.
And that if we don't know something about a kind of music, like, we don't try to hold ourselves above it. We just start with, like, I don't know about that, and so let me just listen and shut the fuck up and come from respect. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Which there's all kinds of areas of music that I don't know about that I
Yeah.
haven't, and so that to me is going to create a better field, and then that is a way that from our field we can set a better example to society by learning about ourselves, by humbling ourselves,
Yeah.
and seeing the areas that we don't walk the walk of the talk that we talk. Because probably a lot of classical musicians, pat themselves on the back for being whatever, humanistic or a liberal, but they don't realizing that, and a lot of it's insecurity. This conductor who's talking about higher art, that, like I said, they may feel insecure because they don't understand jazz, or they don't, there's some aspect of skill.
It's like fear of the unknown.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But which brings us back to, personal development, really being honest with ourselves. And to one of the questions you were going to ask me earlier,
Yeah.
which I think is that I wanted to say this, but I think as artists, we have to recognize, and as people, we have to recognize our tendency to go from one radical end of the spectrum to the other, which is to say, from delusions of grandeur in one moment, being very sort of, drunk in our own beauty and power, our own godliness,
Yeah.
And on the other hand, these moments of like really deep insignificance,
Yeah.
right? So we have difficulty finding the granular distinctions within that. Like, I do this thing really well. Let me just feel that,
Yeah.
proud of myself for doing this one thing really well. Or, and on the other hand, I really could learn a lot about this.
Yeah.
And so every musician here at this workshop, that's what I'm trying to look at, to help them see, like, you could be a great violinist, but not know anything about improvisation. And it's okay to own both of those things, both. The only way we grow is by getting over this, is by having that willingness to sort of acknowledge those distinctions and give up on the temptation to either completely make ourselves gods or aggrandize ourselves, or on the other hand, to just be like beating ourselves up completely.
Yeah. Totally. In terms of improv specifically, what's the biggest hurdle you find musicians have when it comes to when they first start improving or like improvisational jazz?
Well, probably
or
one of the
strings?
things I just said probably would be one of
Yeah?
the biggest things. Yeah, because again, like, people are looking for a piece of information, but it's not information. It starts with yourself. It starts with a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to be honest with yourself. A discipline of setting a vision, setting some goals, and then being true to your word. Like, if you want, like, people here can learn to improvise on YouTube. They could have done it 30 years ago. The only reason they haven't done it is because they didn't do it. It's
Right.
not because, something happened or this. It's like, because they didn't want it. Like, be honest. What do you want? If you want this thing, then go get the resources and find people to help you. Because there's some schmuck like me out there willing to take your money and will do his best to help you.
Yeah.
So it's not the fact that you don't have access to the resources. It's like you need to be clear about what you want. So that would be the higher level answer. The lower level answer is that you need to, and what we've spent a lot of time yesterday and today, and you've seen of it, is to just to think about and articulate the kinds of structures and the creative process. So we talked about this with regards to improv comedy.
Yeah.
So the best way to do an improvised acting scene in improv comedy is for someone to give you structure,
Yeah.
limitations. This is who your character is. This is the setting you're in. This is how long you have to do the scene. These are things you can say. These are things you can't say. This is the topic, right? For example,
Yeah.
those are aspects that are going to make it easier, because then you know how to be free within that box. And we do the same thing with music. We look for structural elements. We submit ourselves to different algorithms around those structures or combinations of those structures, whether it's tempo, harmony, not harmony, density, register, melodic shape, et cetera, et cetera. And so then crafting those structures in a way, and then putting yourself through the process of engaging in that exercise. Like, if you want to be an improv comedian, you need to fucking do an improv comedy.
Yeah.
Like 100 times, and then after you've done 100 of them, you need to be willing to throw them away and be like, okay, now I'm ready to do this, because you've got over yourself.
Yeah.
So most people just aren't willing to get over themselves, So
Yeah.
sorry, that cussing. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I really apologize for that cussing. Not the one before, but I'm done cussing for the rest of the weekend. So.
You got it out.
Well, it's good because for the students here, maybe somebody was offended by it. So if you were, I apologize to you sincerely.
So before we go, and I'm hoping it's okay if he plays us out with something. Is that all right? What is your definition of an artist? If you were to open up your personal dictionary, beside the word artist, what would you find written there?
That's a tricky one. I'm sorry. I sometimes I have a hard time with definition questions like that.
Yeah.
I don't have a clean answer for that.
Okay,
artist.
what makes an impactful artist to you?
I think it's important, all the things I've talked about. I think to be yourself. I think I'll answer it this way.
Yeah.
30 years ago, I thought that I wanted to be the best jazz violinist in the world.
Okay.
Now, it's been a long time that I've realized that is not my goal. It's not a constructive thing to try to be the best at anything.
Right.
To be the best artist. Me and my brother Lewis have actually had a lot of talks about this, by the way, because he's big on that. And I think that it's constricting. I think that in some ways it's kind of false. It's not, to be the best. I mean, I guess there are some things where you could be the best runner in a particular race on a particular day, but as an artist, the reason we love the artists that we love is because they are different, because they are unique. They do something personal. So that's what I want to do as an artist. Is I want to have enough courage to be truly myself as an artist. I don't want to be the best. I want to be myself, and that's what I want for anybody in this room, to really find self-acceptance and to have, in their musical journey, to find however they're going to express who they are, not be comparing themselves to somebody else, not trying to be something because they think they're supposed to or whatever, but really find that acceptance and really find what their vision is and be able to feel good about themselves, what they do every day with that as an artist.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Christian.
You're welcome. Thank you, Chelsea.
So much fun. Before we go, where can people find you?
Christian Howes, HOWES.com. Go to my website. I've got YouTube videos every week. I've got a podcast, Creative Strings Podcast, and hit me up.
All right, amazing. Can you play us a little something? Can you play us out?